Howdy everybody, I've got a question for you today. Have Japanese motorcycles lost their way? It kind of feels like Japanese bikes nowadays are playing it very safe, playing it very easy, and it kind of feels like they're not innovating as much as they used to. You know, it used to be that Suzuki would come out with new bikes all the time. It used to be the Yamaha was coming out with new platforms. And I don't know if it's just a symptom of the global economy, but it feels like everything is cross-platform nowadays and just not as interesting as it once was. So why don't we take a trip down memory lane? Let's think about the late 90s, early 2000s with Japanese motorcycles. Big company like Honda, for example, right? They were coming out with new motorcycles all the time. RC51s, they had all sorts of new motorcycle models. Suzuki was coming out the Hayabusa, really competing, and that's really more of a reflection of the fact that there were way more people buying and enjoying motorcycles. We still have not gotten back to pre-2007 motorcycle sales figures. It's been 15 plus years and we are still kind of languishing in the shadows of the pre-financial recession. And nowadays it feels like there's other companies that are just trying to compete a little bit harder with it, you know. I think when you look at Aprilia and what they're doing in the intermediate market, they came out with a brand new platform for the RS660. They then came out with a new platform for the RS457. You know, you look at CF Moto, it's like they launch a new bike every other year, which is crazy. And it still kind of remains to be seen how CF Moto is going to play out in the larger motorcycle market. But man, it really feels like people are willing to give them a shot, you know? People are willing to put their money and their life on the line for these Chinese motorcycles. It feels like the Japanese motorcycle manufacturers have become a little stagnant, right? Kawasaki, I think, is one of the few exceptions. A lot of their offerings are a little pedestrian, a little vanilla. You know, this Ninja 500 is based on a 6-year-old platform, you know, the Ninja 400, all that stuff. And it kind of feels like, you know, we're at a point now that we should have gotten, you know, something really brand spanking new from Kawasaki, but we haven't. And you look at what they did with the ZX4, like that was a really interesting motorcycle model, right? But overall, you get kind of iterations on the same thing. You look at Yamaha, for example. I think Yamaha is really the canary in the coal mine for how Japanese motorcycles are not really any longer, you know, innovating as much as they used to. The MT-03, the R3, has been largely the same since, what, 2017? They made a couple cosmetic updates here and there. They'll update the plastics, but they're basically doing a bold new graphics a la Suzuki. I mean, it's not as bad as Suzuki, where like they literally don't release a new motorcycle model. They basically just keep slightly updating their old ones. You know, the GSX-8S was one of the brand new bikes that they came out with, and even that was kind of like, you know, okay, like it's parallel to a new chassis, new platform, okay, cool. And they can obviously do it, but they'd rather keep it safe, keep it simple. And it's really interesting because if you look at racing, it's been a very similar story where the European manufacturers have really taken off from where the Japanese used to be. You look at World Superbike, BMW and Ducati pretty much run that show. And just a few years ago, it was Kawasaki and Yamaha that were really going at it with each other in the form of Toprak and Jonathan Rea back in the day a couple of years ago. And then obviously everybody knows that Ducati has complete world domination in MotoGP. The last round that I saw, by the time this video goes live, was the Phillip Island MotoGP round, and that was a top 6 lockout for Ducati, which is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous to have 6 of your bikes in the top 6. And so it really shows that innovation in the super top echelon of motorcycling is being led by the European manufacturers. Ducati is really setting the tone. The aerodynamic improvements, the engine is just ridiculously powerful, and that really puts Ducati in a position of strength, and that technology then trickles down to their street-going motorcycles. And you know, it's kind of sad, but I think the Japanese now are just going to focus on their legacy of bulletproof reliability, their incredibly conservative development paths for all these motorcycles, right? Like the Ninja 500, for example, a category that's currently being, challenged by the RS457, the CF Moto 450 SS. The 500 is really quite a very small evolution on the old Ninja 400 platform, and it really just, I don't know, it makes me a little sad that we didn't get something really unique and interesting. I'd love to see Yamaha come out with a highly updated beginner bike, but it's like they just won't do it, But one thing that was super interesting, and we're going to make a whole dedicated video about this, is Honda's commitment to value in their segment. And we haven't gotten these motorcycles in the US just yet, but the Honda Hornet 750 and the Hornet 1000 are incredibly value driven. And that might be the play the Japanese motorcycle manufacturers make. Instead of trying to chase technological improvements, technological changes, it may be that Japanese manufacturers just decide to, lean on their reputation for quality and reliability, and then just make sure that they are selling a bunch of motorcycles at a great price. I could certainly see them doing that, and I would understand it, I would totally understand from a business perspective to do that, but it just, it makes me sad, because in the 80s and 90s, Honda was totally cut out. They were making crazy stuff. I mean, you had turbo bikes, you had crazy two-stroke homologated race bikes for the street, RC30s, RC45s. I mean, you have so many cool bikes, and it just feels like there's really no longer that risk-taking culture in the Japanese conglomerates. They're really not willing to go to bat to try to develop a new platform or something really different for the masses. And it is kind of sad, because even if they came out with something like that, I think that's the dichotomy between what people say they will buy and what they will actually buy. Most people are not going to buy, a two-stroke race bike for the street, even if it was Japanese, no matter what they say. Not that you can meet emissions with that, but you guys know what I'm saying, right? They're not willing to do that with those motorcycles. They're not willing to, basically put out a bike that they are not going to guarantee that they're going to make some sort of sales with, right? That's the difference nowadays. And it makes it a little more challenging for people to be big Japanese motorcycle fans, because basically what happens is, you have all these super exciting, super interesting motorcycle models coming out from the European manufacturers, from even the Chinese manufacturers now. That Voom 500 SR from CF Moto, their 675 SS, which is funny because the 675 SS on paper is basically a Daytona 660, but people think that it's the second coming of Christ. And they're coming in whether you like to admit it or not, the Chinese motorcycles have crazy value for money. I mean, I understand, not everybody is like me that has been riding for a while and kind of has that old school kind of legacy and heritage kind of thing built in about Japanese motorcycles. If you're just getting into the sport and you have no concept of why a CF Moto would be great or would be bad, or the brand name recognition behind Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, the big four, Honda, if you just look at specs per dollar, I mean, that CF Moto, it costs less than $6,000, and it sounds cool and looks cool and does everything it needs to do, So it's a little tough to imagine in that world,
Folks, I've given away over 53 motorcycles, valued at over $500,000 in my time doing this whole crazy YouTube rigmarole thing, and this Ninja 500 SE is the new kid on the block. Make sure you check out yamanoob.co and become a member for your best chance to win. You'll rack up your entries to win, and you can assign them towards giveaway bikes in the future, or you can hold on to them and then put them towards your favorite bike that we do later on. We've got another really awesome spicy bike coming later for this year, and next year we're going to be doing all the latest and greatest newest bikes, so make sure you're signed up and don't miss your chance.
At the same time, it's really funny. I see so many riders like this guy over here. I think he's on a little Ninja 300 or something like that, and it's kind of funny that we talk about this a lot because you see it online of people they're buying more Chinese bikes, they're doing this, they're doing that, but realistically, I think a lot of people still buy the Japanese bikes. All that being said, about, they're losing their way or this and that, I still see by far, by a wide margin, people mostly buy Japanese motorcycles. They can say all they want, people buy so many of the, Harley Davidsons and 1/3 of every motorcycle sold in the US is a Harley and all that jazz, but at the end of the day, man, people just really dig Japanese bikes because you know you're buying quality, man. Even if they're a little boring, even if they're not as exciting or crazy or interesting as the Italian or Chinese competition, you know what you're getting. And there's like a peace of mind that comes with owning a Japanese motorcycle. You know, it's funny, like a lot of my personal motorcycles have been European, Italian, Austrian, and they are super exciting to ride, but there is a peace of mind that comes with owning a Japanese bike that you just cannot get anywhere else. And that's really, you can't overstate that, you know? You really can't overstate the fact that when you buy one of these bikes, you're like, oh cool, it's just gonna run like a top. And the more you can ride, the better it is, right? It's fun to ride instead of worrying about it breaking down or crazy maintenance costs or God forbid parts availability, you know? And for me as well, even though the Japanese bikes aren't as crazy competitive as they used to be, I still find a kind of solace in riding a Japanese bike. I think that they're really quite nice, you know? They're really quite nostalgic for me in a way. I think they're just classic motorcycling in a way that you don't really see from Italian bikes for me. I mean, but God, it's like when you have just an amazing, beautiful wife who loves you, does everything for you, is dependable, you know, and then you're tempted by an Italian mistress. Don't do it, guys. Stay faithful. Retain the family unit. Don't break your family apart to go buy a Ducati. It's not worth it. Don't turn your garage into a nightmare by owning 2 or 3 Italian bikes, because it's just going to be bad for you. I think what's interesting as well is that the Japanese manufacturers have so much clout in the space. They have so much, you know, like everybody looks to see what they're doing, you know, and some of them are kind of like these sleeping giants, you know. You have I think like Suzuki is the best example, where they waited and waited and waited in the intermediate naked category, and then they launched the GSX 8S and the 8R, and they're so well executed. That's something the Japanese do incredibly well, is that whether you like it or not, if the motorcycles are a little boring or whatever they are just incredibly well executed. They work really well, they do everything really well, and they're such a known quantity. There's usually no weirdness about a Japanese bike. They're just like, you know exactly what you're gonna get. They're gonna work amazingly well, and they're gonna do great. And another point that I find interesting is, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, the Japanese were seen in some ways as we see the Chinese manufacturers nowadays. Now granted, it is slightly different. We literally went to war with the Japanese in the 40s, right? Very ugly war, World War II. We are in a bit of like a stalemate right now with China. I mean, there's obviously tension in the South China Sea, Taiwan, and you know, that I'm not going to get into geopolitics because it's a subject I loosely understand. You know, this is perhaps not the friendliest country to us, and I get why people would say, oh, like, I don't want to trust a Chinese motorcycle because they spy on us, you know, they do a bunch of crazy stuff. And it's true. Like, the Chinese literally do spy on us. We've seen cases of that. And so our economies are so intertwined, right? China is the global supply of basically everything for the world, right? And when you exist in a world like that, it can be kind of challenging to choose to not buy anything Chinese. But I do think when it comes to motorcycling, if it's something you feel very strongly about, that you don't want to support the Chinese government, which it's totally fair, like I don't either, but I think it's so hard to not buy anything Chinese, because China's state and market are so intertwined that if you are supporting Chinese companies, you are in a sense supporting the Chinese government, because they're so closely linked together. You know, they have kind of the whole command communism thing going on. And I think that if you want to really make a statement, you know, not buying a Chinese motorcycle is a way to do that, right? That's definitely a way to do it. And you know, they're trying to get you with the flash, and they're trying to get you with everything. But again, it reminds me of the 60s and 70s. Not that I was alive during that time, but you know, people being reluctant to invest in Japanese vehicles because they kind of felt like they were still the enemy. They were kind of like, well, what are these guys up to, you know? Again, very different geopolitical situation, but it's something to think about if you're that concerned about supporting Chinese versus Japanese motorcycles. Well, boys, that's going to wrap up my thoughts on if Japanese motorcycles have lost their way. Do you think we're in a position where Japanese bikes are losing market share? Do you think it's overblown through social media and what people are actually buying? How many of your friends own Japanese bikes versus Italian or Chinese or American motorcycles even? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this. Drop me a comment down below in the video, and let's start a beautiful discussion down there. Thank you so much for checking out today's video. Reminder, this is a giveaway motorcycle. Head over to yaminoob.co and sign up to become a winner. Yeah, see, that's tough. High schooler in a Beal. That's a classic kill a motorcyclist situation. Sign up on the website, become a member, join the Discord. It's a ton of fun. I appreciate everybody watching today's video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Keep watching Yami Noob.